They bred shorter humans to devour. I almost have to apologize to my listeners for these terrible, yet excellent, but still terrible lectures. Well, alas, someone must do this dirty work, and I don't see anyone else out there doing it. So I think I will ease off. I think I'm running out of discoveries related to this cannibalism topic, but that's just my suspicion. Maybe a hope. Um, let's see. I want to begin with a little heads up. I didn't plan to do my lectures this way, but it's obvious to me now that many of my lectures reinforce the arguments made by others. So if anyone is confused and not convinced by a particular lecture, please just be patient and be courageous and check out the other ones. Well, to begin, the topic of the day, which is the history of subterranean breeding of very short humans for consumption by cannibals. Stories about breeding and selectively modifying humans exist in history, mythology, and science fiction, folklore, and more. And the idea of intentionally creating smaller human subspecies is a recurring theme. If you believe this is pure fiction, please consider the history of domestication. We already bred very small dogs, and domesticated cows originated as much larger animals. If people can breed deformed, hand-sized dogs, I don't see a large leap in believing that the sociopaths who rule this world already bred small humans. Works of fiction hint at the truth. According to the Bible, God punished us, aka man, when the sons of God married our daughters, the daughters of man. Interbreeding between them and us, that's the message, is not permitted. Sons of God must not mix with the daughters of man, must not interbreed. Eventually, God became so angry that he culled our population, leaving Noah, meaning no one. That's the story of Noah's flood for you. Not the traditional interpretation, I suspect. In their fantasy series, Dune, by Frank Herbert, a sisterhood operates an intense, millennia-long selective breeding program designed to manipulate human genetics, carefully combining specific lineages to produce the ultimate human, the Kwisatz Haderach, translated from the fictional Chekhov's language. Kwisatz Haderach literally means shortening of the way. Yes, shortening of the... I understand, I understand. H.P. Lovecraft's The Dunwich Horror is a classic speculative horror story featuring a farm where human women are forced to systematically breed with interdimensional entities, producing abnormal goblin-like or gargoyle-like hybrids. Yes, they don't view us as humans, really. Abnormal goblin-like creatures. Well, maybe not us, the above ground humans I'm speaking with, but I suspect there is a large number of other humans around, underground, still to this day, somewhere. Goblin and gargoyle. Interesting words. Goblin sounds a little like gobble. Yes, they are for gobbling up these little human-like creatures. And gargoyle reminds me of the word gargle, close to drinking. The first offspring in said novel is Wilbur Whateley. His initials are two W's, which is code for 3-3. Just turn them counterclockwise, 90 degrees, those two W's. And that number 33 is just a signature of the secret society, the secretive people. They want us to know, I guess, that they are behind just about everything. The Time Machine by H.G. Wells features the subterranean Morlocks and the surface-dwelling childlike and child-sized Eloi, Eloi maybe, named after Saint Eloi, aka Saint Eligius. His name sounds a lot like religious. Um, there you go. Child-sized creatures, human, well, anthropomorphic ones. Legends, myths, and folk tales are populated with small humans, homunculi, dwarves, gnomes, and imps. I believe they are not entirely fictional, but are based on the secret history of breeding humans for and by cannibals. Many small humans in art and literature have large, normal-sized heads. Um, I guess small heads aren't needed because even the biggest headed humans can be stunningly foolish. More foolish, more, more than foolish enough to live like sheep, cattle, and pigs, though perhaps less content with that life, of course. But physical size matters. The breeders of humans don't want giants. They are too difficult to manage, so they bred smaller humans. Um, I should, as a side note, mention that uh, significantly departing from the normal size for humans, the natural size for humans, always results in negative health consequences. Let's have a look at some slides. Homunculus, meaning little man. Get this silly drawing here of an alchemist creating a homunculus with, and the homunculus is perhaps 12 inches tall, maybe 18, and he's being created in a glass orb heated with fire. Of course, this is pure fiction, but the fiction hints at the truth. Fiction never comes from nothing, ex nihilo. Nope. It's always based on something in reality. There's a curious German myth, I think, or is it Austrian? Untersberg location is rich in folklore One legend speaks of Emperor Charlemagne sleeping within the mountain, underground, cared for by dwarf-like, yes, short people, known as the Untersberger Mandlin. Mandlin? According to the tale, Charlemagne awakens every century to ask if ravens still fly around the mountain. Why would they be flying around the mountain? Are they looking for meat scraps? Hmm. Architecture and sculpture. Well, this is a image of Yester Castle in East Lothian in Scotland. It's quite famous for having a small entrance and being suspected of housing goblins. Gobble gobbles. Um, this is not a castle. This looks much more like a church, which I have identified as kitchens originally. It also looks like the interior of a whale, doesn't it? Well, obviously, it can't be a castle. It wouldn't have such large windows on ground level of all things. So this would have been a place for cooking. There's your goblins are believed to dwell in subterranean areas. Of course, they must come from underground, all these short creatures. I remember the famous giant on the beanstalk was high up in the air. So I guess that's where the giants belong, the ruling class. There's the goblin-sized archway of the Yester Castle. This is a photo I took of a frieze on a church here in Oaxaca City, Mexico. We have a large figure in the center wearing what we now consider to be what is the name? The mitre, that's what it's called, worn by popes and bishops of the Catholic Church. I suspect they have an older history, a non-Christian history. The 10 men assembled around him are kneeling. Most of them seem to be kneeling. And yet, if they were standing, they would still be shorter, significantly shorter. Even their hands are quite a bit smaller than his. And they're not dressed as well as he is. He's got this gigantic cape around, which he's spreading, and with the help of angels, which he's spreading like a mother hen around, like a mother hen spreads her wings, or another bird might spread its wings around her clutch, oh no, her chicks. These men are food. And maybe they're praying for, not today, please. Not today. Um, Curious objects in his left hand here. This is a book. Those are two clasps holding it shut. This is a miniature church. This is quite a common motif, miniature churches and other buildings held by large men. And above this, hard to identify, but I suspect this was meant to represent a machine. So we have literacy, we have literature, architecture, and technology. These are the three gifts our masters gave us. Well, we should add money perhaps and religion, of course. But I suspect that these represent the three gifts that were presented to us during the Great Reset, when millions of us were allowed out of the underground world, and perhaps some remaining above ground natives were somehow persuaded to participate in the civilization rising up around them. It probably had no choice as the forests were destroyed. Similar image, this is in Querétaro, some north of here, also in Mexico. Again, a man holding a book with, well, not a building this time, but some small creature, not quite a sheep, not sure what it is, and I guess a spear in the other hand. What is the message? I'm not sure. There it is. That's the face is somewhat human, kind of deformed creatures that they breed. A couple of statues of dwarves, I assume. Dwarves, I think, are not bred. They do appear, but I guess if you have dwarves mate, does that increase the chances of them? What are the chances of them producing dwarf offspring? Who knows? That was probably happening too. Very strange. What are these sleeves? They look designed to hurt people. Why isn't his hand protruding from the sleeve? Um, does he have no hand? Um, the sunken eyes, they didn't give them pupils. And this ball, is this, what kind of game are they playing? Some cruel theater, I suppose, I suspect, or humiliating, or both cruel and humiliating. Yeah, it's got a kind of pot-like helmet on. Oh, they would have laughed. They were entertaining themselves with these unfortunate people. I'm not sure this. I've used this before, I suspect. No, it's from one of my books. Um, it's probably Roman or Middle Eastern. Again, we have full-size six men, a cow among them, a symbol of food, sacrificial animals. And in the front, we have two undersized humans, well below the shoulder height of other men, and especially the woman. They are not children. They are, this man looks at least middle-aged, and the woman probably the same age, playing a pipe to amuse their masters, perhaps. There's a tripod here. I don't know what's on top. Is she holding a book? Always these books. Yeah, I suspect they couldn't read, but books were considered magical. Well, I think the cow is there to remind us that we're dealing with food here, and these people may well be eaten, sacrificed. Although, This man isn't dressed so well either. None of them are, just wearing tunics. Maybe they're all slated for the kitchen. The small humans, goblins, angels and goblins working together. Yes, black and white, good and evil, working in harmony. Isn't that the Masonic myth? Um, the angel is holding a scale. On the one side is a chubby, tiny but chubby human. And on the other side, some other creature, maybe human. And these are not the scales of justice. The original function of scales is to weigh food and other commodities. This little human weighs a lot. Well, what's the price on his meat? This goblin can't wait. He's already eating or planning or licking the nearby, the adjacent human, I guess, dressed a little bit like a soldier. And as I've argued before, in the horror of armor, soldiers originally were simply sacrificial humans, and their armor was part of a humiliation ritual and perhaps necessary for or useful in the electrocution execution ritual. History has a few notable examples of short people, also tall. I mean, people named tall sometimes and named short. Um, Pepin the Short, most obvious. I think there were some English kings named Short, but I couldn't find them. Um, Charles III was known as the Short. These are all fictional people, by the way. Dionysius Exiguus, John the Dwarf, a desert father of the early Christian church, and so on. There's a picture of Pepin the Short on his throne, holding his silly, is that a wand or is that a scepter? Is that the pronunciation, scepter or scepter? Famous paintings, one famous painting. Um, who is this? Well, let me read my notes first. Paintings with humans possessing disproportionately. Yes, yes. The experts want to give us an explanation, a rationalization for unusually small humans depicted in paintings and sculpture. Um, they want to argue that mm, no, not that humans were bred to be small, not that they are literally accurate paintings and statues. No, they claim that small or undersized humans in paintings and sculptures indicate hierarchical scale, granting persons of higher status larger bodies. Um, well, there is some truth there, perhaps, but it's literal truth. Secondly, they claim small humans exist due to foreshortening. That's artists will know what that means. Um, However, there is uh, evidence, not just evidence, proof that in apocryphal texts like the Acts of John and the Acts of Peter, which describe Jesus himself as appearing remarkably short and uncomely, ugly, sometimes specifically estimating his height at 3 cubits, barely 4.5 feet. Historical church fathers are also involved. Fourth century hymnographer and deacon Ephraim the Syrian also recorded a tradition that Jesus measured 3 human cubits, about 4.5 feet. This is Velasquez, famous paintings. What century? 1600. It's called Las Meninas, the children. And among the children is a dwarf. This is the Infanta, which is almost equivalent to the princess. A dog. Well, they're not posing actually. The artist has a self-portrait here. It's himself. And there is a mirror in the background. And reflected in the mirror are the king and queen, whom he is painting. And well, their portraits or their faces in this mirror are very fuzzy. They don't seem particularly well dressed. We have this intentionally messy red spot above them. Isn't that a little ominous? Red, blood red. As I've argued before, and with some evidence, all monarchs, kings, and queens were actually sacrificial humans before the modern age. It was all a game which the so-called kings and queens didn't understand until they were, well, maybe never. Um, so yes, the king and queen would be standing exactly where the viewers of this painting are standing. The implication is clear. We are the king or the queen. We are the sacrificial humans. And of course, the children too. And the dwarf. And the dog. They probably ate dogs too. There's a nun there making perhaps some kind of hand gesture. The claw. I don't know what that is. Um, there is an interesting image embroidered on the artist's vest. Here's a close-up. I suggest that's not quite a cross. That looks to me like a ornamental dagger. Something for cutting meat. How appropriate. Going, well, reputedly, these are older paintings. I don't believe in the dating they give us, the dates they give us. This and we'll have a series of a few paintings with supposedly the Virgin Mary and her child Jesus, the the iconic, the most famous sacrificial human of all, Jesus. Well, and this 3 or 4 paintings I will show of Mary um, and Jesus, well, they don't resemble each other, as I suspect. There was no concept of Mary and Jesus more than 150 years ago. These characters were invented, given to us afterwards, and applied to images of women holding children, and the women and the children rarely look the same. Um, I've never quite seen the Virgin Mary looking this way, nor Jesus looking this way. Looks very European, which is where the cannibal cult began its work. That doesn't look like any Virgin Mary I've seen before either. Hardly looks female. And this little Jesus is simply a small adult Jesus, making a hands gesture, of course. Stars connected to the secret societies, Knights Templar, and others. Here's a, that's again making a hand sign. Hmm. This is an offering. This probably not the mother. This is simply a woman in charge of sacrificial children. And this is an offering to the guests, the cannibals, a display. How do you like today's turkey? It's awful. Well, this woman doesn't look so happy, but I suppose she knew what she was doing. This one-third size, a quarter size adult in her arms. Yes, of course, the experts will make excuses and say, well, it was somewhat sacrilegious to portray Jesus as a baby, a helpless little baby, so he had to be portrayed always as an adult. Yes. No, this was the reality. Small humans were being bred and eaten. There's that picture again. Yeah, I forgot to mention the three heads. Of course, it's very normal to portray a man standing on the heads of three other men. What excuses will the experts make? Oh gosh. Well, there's that famous mountain in the US with the heads of four or five former presidents. It's to show respect. Sure it is. And the angels, also little creatures. Ah, folklore. Once Upon a Time was one of my favorite genres, if not my favorite. Small people also exist in folk tales. What excuse is offered for this by the experts? They can't speak about foreshortening. Secondly, they can't resort to the hierarchical symbolism because short people, the dwarves, gnomes, and imps, um, well, I think I've gone astray there. Obviously, they're not high status figures. On the contrary, folk tales about dwarves feature short, bearded beings who are miners, diggers of mostly of metals, gold. At best, master craftsmen they were, and guardians of hidden treasures. Norse mythology and Germanic folklore often portray them as wise and magical creatures associated with stone, living, of course, in underground kingdoms, always underground. In fake, all is fake mythology, Norse mythology, and modern fantasy, dwarves are often depicted as a distinctly separate, short-statured humanoid species deliberately shaped by creators. Uh-huh. In fake Scandinavian lore, it's all fake. Four dwarves named Ostri, Vestri, Nordri, and Sutri were tasked with holding up the sky, while others, that's like Atlas, while others are credited with forging legendary artifacts like Thor's hammer. Hmm. Working underground, they were mining. That they had to do something and to stay healthy and to be useful before being eaten. And someone had to dig all those tunnels. I'm sure some secret tech was used, but don't underestimate the chance that many millions of humans were involved in digging the catacombs and underground cities that exist around the world. Um, Tasked with holding up the sky. What could that mean? Um, well, I guess they had to reinforce the roofs of their tunnels and chambers underground. That would be like holding up the sky, I suppose. In German folklore, brothers invented German folklore, mostly invented by the brothers Grimm. They popularized dwarves as helpers, tricksters, helpers. No, slaves. Tricksters, maybe tricky because they wanted to escape. Also, um, portrayed dwarves as gnomes who reward the righteous and punish the greedy. Yes, they reward the righteous by giving them their flesh. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the most famous dwarf tale of all. It tells the story of a young prince who hides in the forest. Oops, a young princess. This was before transgender times. She hides in the forest with seven helpful miners and housekeepers. Well, they're all dwarves. And she needed protection from her evil stepmother's mother. The message is that young women can sneak into the home or barracks of seven single men, slaves, and suffer no consequences. A good message to send young children. Thanks, Brothers Grimm. In the same story, a queen, well, it starts this way, a queen accidentally pierces her finger with a needle. A drop of red blood falls on the snow. Needles and blood refer to adrenochrome. The most important, I suppose, the most important part of cannibalism. We get fetal tissue in our toxic vaccines. Death for us, death and disease for us. They harvest blood from healthy children to extend their lives. That's how they treat us. No different from bankers, governments, and corporations as they figuratively suck our figurative blood. The seven dwarves are miners. The word miners is really a homophone for the word minors, as in not quite adults yet, minors. And both have the syllable min in it, or min, could that be the root of mine, the possessive sense? Miners are possessions, were once possessions, well, still are. I was just watching a mining disaster story from China. Apparently, they still have, despite mechanization, they still have 3 million people working in the mining industry. Many of them living or, well, spending their shifts inside, well, inside the mines. Horrible stuff. But society needs it, civilization needs it, progress needs it. Oh, yes, progress. All those poor men. Ah, Rumpelstiltskin. One of my, once upon a time, one of, well, still is I consider it the most interesting folk tale. But before we get there, what a curious coffin we have here. It was supposed to be a glass coffin, yes, for Snow White when because she ate the apple, that evil fruit, of course. Fruit is evil, meat is good. Um, but this coffin looks a whole lot like a food display case. Hmm. I've spoken about that in churches were meat markets. There's another image of poor Snow White. Why was she Snow White? Never saw sunlight. And the poor dwarves weeping in around the glass coffin. You'll find glass coffins in many Catholic churches here in Mexico and in Europe. Gnomes. This is a novel, I believe. Rump. Okay, let's get the rump. Okay. I've gotten ahead of myself again, but the word rump means hindquarters, back end buttocks of a animal, particularly of livestock animals. The rump. Uh, that's Let me offer you my interpretation of the Rumpelstiltskin story, which I know very well. Rumpelstiltskin has the word skin in it too. Isn't that a little troubling? He is rump and skin. Anyway, the story is based on reality. Of course it is. All fiction is based to some extent on reality. Short people were, well, by the way, in case you didn't know, Rumpelstiltskin is a tiny man. Um, Forgot what word is used to describe him, but he is dwarf-like. Uh, and as I um, said, short people were bred underground, later convinced to come above ground or forced above ground during the Great Reset. Not all of them, but I think they just had too many humans. They had bred and too little food above ground as they had over exploited the environment. So they introduced the agricultural revolution, so we could all eat vegetables and grasses. I mean, grains. Um, before that time, as I said before, humans raised underground were tricked into going above ground with the promise that they were chosen to be kings. And this story is about that wish, at least, well, in this case, it's the young woman who wants to be, what's the word? The miller's daughter in this story allows her father to hand her over to the king, the local king, as if a miller could, spend time with a king, just casually meet him and say, "Here, have my daughter. She can sow gold sow straw into gold. She's magical." And the greedy king said, "Yes, give her to me." Um, and whereupon the king promptly locked her up in his castle, which reminds me of my lecture, Fortress World. Is that was that the title? I think so, in which I argued, I think convincingly, that fortresses, castles, and such structures were not defensive. On the contrary, they were to hold humans inside, to imprison them, um, to corral them like livestock for future sacrifice. And the yards inside these castle walls were exercise yards. But I go astray a little. The miller's daughter, once in the castle, discovers she is a prisoner. Surprise, surprise. And the king is greedy and wants her to actually fulfill her father's promise, which she can't. She cannot transform straw into gold by weaving. Weaving was the work to which slave women were mostly occupied. Um, the king threatens to kill her if she does not transform straw into gold. Not a very nice man. But she marries him later, of course. None of this is meant to make any sense, except, well, if you look for the secret meanings, the hints. Um, as I said, women were used to sew the wonderful clothes worn by the aristocracy. I think there's lots of images available, but I'm not sure if any of them are really accurate. Most of them are outrageously ornamental clothing worn by kings and queens of the past, maybe dukes. Dukes, maybe that means ducks. Again, dehumanizing language, puns. So women were forced to sew, women slaves, and slave men were primarily forced to dig, tunnel, mine, and build. Mining includes mining for gold, so Rumpelstiltskin has the power to produce gold. Of course, he never gets the child. I mean, I'm skipping some detail here, sorry. Um, the poor woman could not transform straw into gold, so this Rumpelstiltskin appears and offers to save her life by doing the work for her, creating gold. Apparently, he had lots of gold. That makes sense, yes, because Short men, short people were mostly employed as miners, minions, small creatures. Um, but anyway, he did the favor for her in return for her promise that he would receive her child. Desperately wanted a child. Of course he did. I used to sympathize with that, thinking, well, dwarves in the Middle Ages wouldn't easily find mates, partners. So he was driven to desperation. He just loved children a lot and begged this woman to give him a child in return for his favor. The least she could have done. She didn't even ask for his name. Um, and she did offer him a necklace first and later a ring. Very symbolic. Sounds like engagement gift and marriage symbol. But she did not give him the child. As a result, he was very angry. And in the last scene in the book, the author portrayed him as a witch, even as a cannibal, because in that final scene, he dances around a boiling cauldron and sings about the child he expects to receive. When it's clear he will not receive it, he is so furious that he tears himself in half and sinks into the ground, returning, I suppose, to his origin. Um, and the tearing in half perhaps foreshadows his destiny to be slaughtered and eaten. Other fairy tales present male imps and frogs who wish to be married to a beautiful woman. The imps and frogs represent ugly, dehumanized humans bred in subterranean complexes. Therefore, the frog usually comes from a well, not a pond, but a well, a hole dug by humans. And now I remember that story I did, that lecture about the indigenous psyop, in which I mentioned or covered an article about a murdered Native American named Zechariah Shorty. Zechariah Shorty. Have a look at that again. His mother, his imaginary mother, is holding up his imaginary portrait, and the top of his head is not included, well, cut off by the frame, making him even shorter. Books, yeah, books, novels mostly. Tom Thumb, for example. I never read this folk tale or nor the novel based on it, but he's thumb-sized. Well, that's probably an exaggeration. Thumb-sized creatures not much used to the cannibal club. Um, Maybe a better example is Jonathan Swift's novel, famous novel, Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's full name is Lemuel, spelled Lemuel, but pronounced, I suppose, Lemuel. The mule. Mules were also food, as were donkeys, and still are. Apparently, the Chinese have a huge project somewhere in a semi-desert raising donkeys. Well, Gulliver becomes a literally short character when he arrives on an island. Well, it depends on the island he washes ashore upon, as he has two islands to visit. And on the second island, Brob Dingnag, Brob Dingnag, Gulliver is roughly the size of an insect. Alice in Wonderland. Alice goes underground and shrinks. She also grows, but also shrinks. And while she visits the Duchess' kitchen, a human baby is thrown about like a piece of meat. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, uh, the little munchkins, and the little China doll people, all are very small. Munchkins. Nice name, isn't it? Were they named for their love of eating or munching? Or were they named by the wizard and his clan who loved to munch on little people? Munchkins, munchkine, kine meaning cattle. Um, the Wizard of Oz, at the end of the novel, flies away in a hot air balloon. I take that to be a reference to the old world tradition of flying in airships. Peter Pan never grows up and never grows to full size. He lives with his captive children underground, or at least sleeps with them underground, where none grow up, not physically or mentally. The Oompa Loompas in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The Oompa Loompas were obviously abducted from their tropical home and are being kept prisoner by Willy Wonka. There's that double W initials. Um, his factory is involved in experiments, science experiments, food experiments. And he succeeds, accidentally, I suppose, at shrinking the boy Mike TV, shrinks him, and turns two other children into food. Yes, I thought it was all a little bit strange at first, but now it is much, much worse than merely strange, isn't it? This pattern of small people turning into food or being named food or given names associated with eating. Well, the pattern speaks for itself, I believe. Um, Another famous novel, um, The Tin Drum by Gunter Grass. It won the Nobel Prize of Literature. It has a character named Oscar Matzerath. He decides, like Peter Pan, to stop growing at the age of 3 because he saw that all adults were being swallowed up by fascism and the banality of the adult world. Um, Arietta Clock, another small 4-inch tall character in a novel series, The Borrowers fiction series. Vlad Taltos from the from Stephen Brust's Vlad Talto series. Um, Vlad Taltos is the main character, I guess, the eponymous character. He's shorter than the elite Dragarians. In his world, they fly, maybe in airships. No, they are angels. They are mobile nobles. Stuart Little, famous novel about a small protagonist who looks like a mouse. Isn't that cute? We think it's cute, but it's actually dehumanizing. Um, or that is the origin. I guess we can treat it like light humor. Aha, a human that's actually a mouse. Um, and let's not forget, how could we forget The Lord of the Rings, and its diminutive hobbits. Hobbits stand just over 3 feet tall, but carry the weight of the Middle Earth on their shoulders. Atlas again, well, if you live underground, yes, you can make this joke. You're there to hold up the Middle Earth. Hobbits, strange word. Hob and bits. Turns out that the word hob is a word. Uh, means side of fireplace. And bit means small piece related to Old English bite, act of biting, and related to bitta, or piece bitten off. So the whole name means small piece bitten off beside fireplace. Barbecue anyone? Coincidentally, no. Baggins, the hobbit, the protagonist, spends a great deal of time near fireplaces, especially one. Spends some of his most iconic moments near one. And a sword, his sword, I suppose his sword, they tell us it's his sword, is mounted on the wall above his fireplace. Swords, if you must know, were not weapons of war. They were kitchen instruments for cutting large animals. Okay, animals. Well, they didn't just eat humans, they did eat larger animals, mammals, large birds, large fish. So sword would be very useful. Um, let's see. In Rivendell, during the Lord of the Rings, an older Bilbo spends his evenings relaxing in Elrond's great hall of fire, where a fire is always kept lit. It is here that he sits and composes poetry, including his famous song, I sit beside a fire, the fire, and think. What were you thinking about? Very funny. Slide. Okay, I have a slide. Of course. Finally. Another novel I've never read. Oh, those minions, so popular. They must be eaten. Tasty little things. A little bit egg-like. A lot of many famous children's stories, animated children's stories, have characters who are egg-shaped. Carimero is one I personally remember. Yeah, nice. Nice to portray somewhat human-like characters as eggs, things we normally eat. Get Shorty. Oh, we're into film already. Um, I had a slide with the grand elf standing beside, um, what's his name? That Bilbo, Bilbo the Hobbit, just so that you could see the size difference. Grand elf, Gandalf. Sorry, that's his real name, Gandalf. Oh, by the way, so happens, surprise, surprise, that in the Lord of the Rings series, we have cannibalism. Yeah, can't escape it. Um, he, Tolkien, Tolkien hinted that orcs are not above eating human flesh. And in the movie, features orcs casually discussing consuming fallen comrades. Golem. Golem was a river folk hobbit. He devolved into a creature that survived on fish, goblins, human-like creatures, and human infants. Local woodmen and Gandalf allude to him as a terror who stole babies from cradles. Grima Worm Tongue. Wow, what was she doing? Uh, she was accused of cannibalism, of having eaten and murdered and consumed the fallen wizard Lotho. Sackville. Baggins. Oh, this wizard sounds like he may have been a hobbit, as Bilbo, his last name was Baggins. Back to my notes. Oh, I guess we can look at a few slides in a moment. Um, the movie Dwarf Fortress refers to the highly popular, notoriously complex construction and management video game known as Slaves to Armok, God of Blood, Chapter 2, Dwarf Fortress. In that game, players design and maintain underground dwarven settlements, often digging elaborate military training grounds and fortresses to fend off sieges. Isn't that cute? Yes. The World Cannibal Cult has our children playing a game version of a multi-century crime against humanity. Those dwarves represent human beings who were forced to live underground. Ah, the enormity, the mockery, the ignorance of playing such a so-called game. Um, yeah, get Shorty. Where are you? There you are. Did I share it already? Did I remember to share? I did. Get Shorty, a famous movie I did not see, like so many other great movies. Well, this one was interesting, of course, because it has a short person as its main character. Which reminds me, yesterday, my good friend recommended listening to a song called The Short Gay People. Anyway, I forgot to look that up. Could have provided some music with this lecture. Danny DeVito is shorty. He is very short. I didn't include his height. Um, his short stature. I wonder how long he lived. Do these people live full lives? Um, there's a goblin. Reminded me of him just a little. No, um, no insult intended. The plot of Get Shorty. Yeah, some interesting names here again. Chili Palmer. Chili is food. Miami-based loan shark and movie buff when his leather jacket is taken by rival mobster Ray Bones. Bones are the remains of a meal. Barboni. Chili retrieves it and breaks Bones' nose. Bones ambushes him at the office, but Chili shoots first, grazing Bones' forehead. Just brilliant plots these people think of. Well, Bones' boss refuses to retaliate, reminding him that Chili is under the protection of Brooklyn mob boss Momo. Momo, come on. Is that really the name of a mob boss? Well, it turns out that Momo is a among other things, a Japanese word that commonly means peach, and in Japanese, steamed dumpling in Tibetan. Yeah, so these humans are food. Humans are food for, well, for cannibals. Oh, lovely. Yeah, well, I do teach children, and sometimes my students tell me what they've been reading. One of my students was reading a Chinese book last year, which so happened to also have cannibalism in it. I asked for the title. It was mistranslated, and well, that book includes a chapter named "Human Rat." How nice! Um, the mistranslated title took me to this 2025 video game. I think it is The Hungry Lamb, which coincidentally includes cannibalism scenes. There you go. The Hungry Lamb, a story of hope flickering amid famine, trafficking, revenge, and cannibalism. That's what our children need. Novels and video games with cannibalism. Gargoyles. Very imaginary creatures. Supernatural. No. Unnatural. Am I done yet? Not quite. I wish to say a few things about our current time as they relate to breeding. Are we shorter than our rulers? Well, depends what country you're in, maybe. Most US presidents are above average height. Northwestern Europeans are generally taller than other ethnic groups, with, I think, an exception in Africa. But even our rulers are not really giants unless we compare them to dwarves, gnomes, etc. Perhaps human breeding had other effects on our appearance, not only shortening us, or some of us. Did breeding create ethnic groups that look very different from others? Are the differences we see among our ethnic groups a product of natural genetic drift, possibly amplified by racism? I mean, by refusing to mix with tribes who look different? And or did the world's human breeders create differences on their global network of subterranean human breeding farms? I was in the gym today and saw people who look very diverse, more than you would expect from one species, I suspect. Many different shapes and heights. We may never know the answers, but I suspect some of our qualities are the products of breeding, not of natural genetic drift. And the diversity we see, especially among temperate peoples and people from temperate climates, they don't exist in pre-contact rainforest tribes. They're much more homogeneous physically. Um, Whether our diversity of shapes and colors is a product of breeding or not, today, no one in mainstream society is interested in breeding humans. Well, no one is openly interested because it's considered eugenics, which is taboo. Instead, the fraudsters who control science and the global economy gave us the genetically modified organism GMO con game. On the basis of the unprovable fake theory of genetics, they created such research and development con games known as gene therapy and genetic modification. I know no one who was cured of anything by gene therapy. I haven't read any news about such a victory. No, they don't want us cured at all. That should be obvious by now. And I never saw any new plant or animal whose unique qualities could not be produced by traditional breeding methods. Years ago, I heard that gene splicing experts succeeded at combining a frog's skin gene with a strawberry's genome so that the strawberry would have longer shelf life and transport better. Where is that strawberry? Where, oh, where? For decades, Mexicans panicked about GMO corn. But what proof do we have that traditional heirloom corn varieties are being contaminated by GMO pollen, presumably carried everywhere by winds? None. In fact, I suspect the GMO boogeyman was invented to distract us from the real danger, the poisons farmers voluntarily spray on crops and the declining fertility of our farmland. What about Terminator seeds? How did Monsanto or whoever develop wheat and other crops that produce dead seeds? I do not know. But why couldn't that be achieved with traditional breeding techniques too? What about genetically enhanced children, so-called designer babies? Do you know any? Unnatural mutations happen, but not controlled mutations. All mutations appear to be accidental mutations caused by exposure to toxic chemicals. Even the theory that exposure to nuclear radiation causes genetic mutations is a myth. A myth founded on the lie that nuclear radiation is dangerous, if it even exists. I do not know. We can guess why the people of supposedly radioactive Hiroshima and Nagasaki quickly rebuilt their cities after they were destroyed by nuclear bombs with no ill effects, no spike in cancer rates. Amazing, wasn't that? Geiger counters, which reputedly measure nuclear radiation, are even more useless than the COVID-19 PCR test. Who has a Geiger counter? No one I know. Of course, the price is unaffordable. The word Geiger, this may interest you, is High German for fiddle player. Isn't that funny? It's just a game. And in British English, to fiddle can mean to alter or falsify for dishonest gain. As in, he fiddled the figures in the report. Yeah, you can fiddle around with your blasted Geiger counters and scare the world. Because the world, we, too few of us, are demanding proof. And too few of us are realizing there is proof of being lied to. Returning to the mundane world, here we are deeply corrupted by a culture of appearances. Instead of breeding ourselves, we are resorting to altering our appearance with steroids, bullroids, weight loss pills, jewelry, skin creams, cosmetics, cosmetic surgery, wigs, clothes, liposuction, silicone injections, and implants, tattoos, hair design, hair dyes, shaving, electrolysis, hair plucking, elevator shoes for people who are self-conscious about being short, uplifting and padded bras, manicures, pedicures, colored contact lens, and more. It's an enormous industry that makes us superficial, vain, and poor. While human breeding does not happen among us, except perhaps in underground military bases, Animal breeding continues unabated, producing freaks of nature. Dogs, cats, rabbits, cows, and chickens seem to be the primary victims of our for-profit breeding madness. None of these new breeds could survive independently in nature, and none are designed to live long and healthy. But we can be sure that our enemies are doing everything in their power to live long and healthy with the help of adrenochrome and whatever else they ingest, inject, and so on. Well, on a personal note, I am determined to live to 100. I didn't actually think I would reach 50 when I was in my late 20s. I could see my health declining, but I figured out what my body wanted and my mind too. So presently, at the age of 57, I might be healthier and more energetic than most of the Cannibal Club's 57-year-olds. And I can almost guarantee that my mental health is superior to theirs. Let them chew on that. I'm presently working on shortened, well, half size, well, splitting my books into volumes so that they can be printed at by Lulu and mailed to anyone who wants them. You can inquire by and reach me at, where was it? There, Prophet of Fiction at proton.me. I guarantee you'll be, what's the right word? Entertained, perhaps?